3 days ago, on the 31st of July, the federal government published a plan for the Colorado River. 4 volumes. It decides who loses water for the next 10 years. The plan allows cuts to the 3 lower basin states of up to 3 million acre-feet per year in severe drought running through 2036. And its own appendix models the first 2 years directly, a shortage of 1.5 million acre-feet and all 400 simulated futures. Arizona's share is 760,000 acre-feet, California's 440, Nevada's 50. Arizona's own water department responded the same day in writing. The plan contains, quote, sideboards that are unacceptable for Arizona, reductions that would, quote, devastate Arizona's water users and its economy. The governor went further. She accused the federal government of forcing Arizona to take, her words, the majority of draconian water cutbacks. Here is how it came to this. The 7 states that share the river had a deadline, February 14th of this year, to agree on their own plan. They missed it. So the federal government wrote one for them, and it takes effect on the 1st of October. The states can still replace it with a deal of their own. They've been failing to make that deal for 3 years. While those statements were going out, the reservoir itself was doing something quieter. On the 2nd of August, the Bureau of Reclamation's daily report put Lake Mead at 1,040.9, 6 feet above sea level. The lowest it has ever been in the 90 years since Hoover Dam filled is 1,040.58. That record is from July of 2022. As this video is being made, the lake sits about 4 inches above it and falling. So that is the river. Every news camera in the Southwest is pointed at it. This video is about what the cameras are missing because the state's own documents, its groundwater models, its court orders, its well registries say the emergency that decides where you can actually live is under the ground. And those documents name the places. This is the relocation file. The 10 Arizona towns running out of water. Every number you see on screen will carry its source printed next to it in the moment it is spoken. Pause it. Look it up. Some of the most repeated numbers in this story turned out to be wrong. When we did that in the last chapter of this video is a list of the ones that died. Before the countdown, 90 seconds on the system, because every town on this list is standing in one of its 2 gaps. Rule 1, since 1980, inside the state's designated active management areas, nobody may sell a subdivided lot without proving a 100-year water supply. That is the law that makes Phoenix possible. Rule 2 is what happens everywhere else. Outside those zones, the state still studies the water, and if it finds the supply inadequate, the sale goes ahead anyway. The finding is printed on the sales contract, and that is the whole consequence. And underneath both rules, there is a trapdoor. In Arizona law, a subdivision means 6 or more lots. Split a parcel 5 ways, and the 100-year rule never attaches, not to the seller and not to the buyer. Keep splitting 5 at a time, and you can build a town this way. There is one exception to Rule 2, and it proves the point. State law lets a county vote unanimously to make an inadequate finding actually block the sale. In 45 years, 2 counties have done it. Everywhere else in rural Arizona, inadequate water is a disclosure, and disclosures do not stop closings. One more piece of context, because the comment section will raise it. Golf uses about 2% of Arizona's water, and that figure comes from the golf industry itself, though independent federal data lands in the same range. What the state's own reporting actually shows about golf is different and worse. For 2 decades, 1/3 to 1/2 of Arizona's courses exceeded their legal water allotments every year, with little consequence. data centers. Independent trackers count roughly 100 operating and 80 more planned. No state agency keeps an official census, which is itself worth sitting with. When the city of Mesa approved one such center in 2021 at up to 1.4 million gallons a day, the lone no vote on the council put it plainly: I cannot in good conscience approve this mega data center using 1.4 million gallons per day. And the real number, over all of it, agriculture takes roughly 70% of everything the state uses. Keep that ratio. Every story in this video happens inside it. Hold that. The countdown starts in the suburbs and ends at a town that spent 281 days cut off. Number 10, Queen Creek, on the southeast edge of the Phoenix Valley, population 89,000, the fastest growing town in Arizona. Queen Creek is on this list for what it had to do to keep growing. It went out and bought another community's river water. In 2018, the town agreed to buy the Colorado River entitlement attached to a farm in Cibola, 200 miles away on the California border, 2,033 acre feet a year, $24 million. The water started flowing in June of 2023. The river counties sued. Their argument was bigger than one farm. If a suburb can buy a farm's river entitlement and pipe it away, every farm on the river becomes an inventory item for the cities, and the communities around them are holding land with no water under its value. And in February of 2024, a federal judge agreed the review was defective, ruling that the government's approval of the transfer was, quote, arbitrary and capricious, and ordering a full environmental review. The water keeps flowing while that review runs. It is due in the spring of 2027, which means Queen Creek is currently growing on water a court may yet send back. So Queen Creek doubled down in a different direction. Through 2025, it bought rights to roughly 1.7 million acre feet of groundwater under the Harquahala Valley, 70 miles west, for about $285 million, financed with 40-year certificates at 4.9% interest. The town describes the resulting portfolio as 90% drought-proof. That description is the town's own. The counterweight, it is a real one. Queen Creek saw this coming 5 years before the state forced anyone's hand. The state's engineers found its imports would do no unreasonable harm, and the bond market rated the whole plan AA. Home values here have barely moved, down less than 0.5% on the year, the steadiest market on this entire list. Number 10 is what a town looks like when it plays the game well. It is on the list because of what the game now costs: $250 million, borrowed over 40 years for water that a court is still deciding. Number 9, Buckeye, the far west edge of Metro Phoenix, 125,000 people, up 37% since 2020. Buckeye is on this list because it announced a city's worth of homes over an aquifer the state says is already spoken for. In June of 2023, the state released its groundwater model for the Phoenix area and stopped approving new subdivisions that rely on groundwater. The number usually quoted from that model is 4.86 million acre feet of unmet demand. The state's own update, 18 months later, revised the shortfall to 3.6 million, still a canyon. And this spring, a state court struck down the rule that enforced the freeze, calling it improperly adopted. The water department is appealing. The shortfall is not the part being argued. Into that gap, Buckeye is planning the largest master plan community in the state's history. Teravalis, 37,000 acres, a planned 100,000 homes. The first village sells houses today on water certificates issued before the freeze. For roughly 90% of the plan, there is no approved water supply. The developer's earlier 100-year analysis expired in 2020, and the state refused to renew it. At the grand opening of that first village in November 2025, the governor stood in the model homes and said water sustainability and growth are not trade-offs. The state's model, her own departments, is the document that says otherwise for 90% of the acreage behind her. Buckeye's answer is to import that paid $80 million for rights to about 6,000 acre-feet a year under the Harquahala Valley. That price works out to roughly $13,000 per acre-foot of yearly entitlement. And the pipeline that would actually move that water does not yet exist. One detail from Buckeye's own portfolio deserves a sentence because it is the strangest fact in this chapter. Downtown Buckeye pumps about 30,000 acre-feet of shallow, brackish groundwater every year just to keep it from flooding basements. 3 times what its customers drink, too salty to serve, excluded from the state's model because treating it costs money nobody is committed. The city short of water is also a city bailing it out of the ground. The counterweight. Buckeye already holds certificates for about 23,000 lots, which at its current pace is 20 years of legal building, and in late 2025, a private utility won the first new 100-year designation in this valley in a quarter century, reopening part of the map. People who own a Buckeye house today hold a 100-year supply the law protects. What the market says, Zillow's index has Buckeye down 1.5% on the year and almost 14% below its 2022 peak. The homes announced ahead of the water are being repriced ahead of it too. Number 8, Casa Grande, halfway between Phoenix and Tucson in Pinal County, 70,000 people, up 30% since 2020. Pinal County is where the groundwater freeze happened first. In June of 2021, 2 years before Phoenix, the state's water department declared, in its own words, the days of utilizing native groundwater for development in Pinal are over. It's done. Casa Grande is on this list for what its growth machine did next. It found the doors the freeze does not cover. A subdivision needs a 100-year water certificate. A rental community is not legally a subdivision. So the lots that could no longer be sold were built anyway as build to rent. At one count, more than 4,500 rental units were moving through the Casa Grande pipeline in about 20 developments. And this April, the County Planning Commission voted 7-2 to recommend a data center campus called Lao Se on 3,300 acres nearby, up to 3 gigawatts of computing. The developer's early paperwork put its water demand at close to 4 million gallons a day. In the same basin, the state closed to new subdivisions 5 years ago. For scale on how differently this can go, when a similar campus was proposed inside Tucson city limits last year, that council killed it 7-0. The vote in Pinal County went the other way. Same aquifer system, different rooms. The counterweight, and this one is genuinely large. In March of 2026, the water company serving Casa Grande won the first new 100-year designation in Pictou County in more than 20 years. Enough, in the governor's words, to build 80,000 new homes. The jobs are real too. A Lucid factory, a Kohler plant that opened in 2024 with 400 jobs. One honesty note on the factory, because the promotional number still circulates. The plant's stated ambition is 400,000 vehicles a year. Its actual 2025 production was 17,840. For Casa Grande's homes, down 1.5% on the year, 14% under the peak. The market is treating the paper water and the missing water as the same thing. Number 7, the city of Maricopa, 20 minutes south of Phoenix, also in Pinal County. 78,000 people, up almost 35% since 2020. Maricopa is on this list because it is the place where the price already knows. Zillow's index puts the typical Maricopa home at $345,000, down 3.8% in a year, down almost 19% from the 2022 peak. That is the deepest fall of any place in this video, in a city that added people faster than almost anywhere in the States. Sales volume is down by a third. The average listing waits 4 months. Growth and decline in the same town at the same time. Here is the water underneath that. Maricopa sits inside the Pinot freeze. It keeps building through 2 doors. A stack of certificates issued years before the freeze and its private utilities designation, about 23,000 acre-feet a year, of which the city currently uses roughly half. Around the city, the farms took the cut that residents have not felt yet. When the river shortages hit, central Arizona's agricultural pool of Colorado River water went to zero and stayed there. By 2024, in the irrigation district around Maricopa, about 30% of the farmland had gone out of production. The wider market Maricopa sits in tells you which way the wind blows. Phoenix has the highest share of listings with price cuts of any big metro in America. The region's largest builder is spending an average of $55,000 per home on incentives to move inventory. Building permits across the metro fell 20% last year. None of that is a crash. All of it is a market walking backward, slowly, watching the water news. The counterweight, the utilities designation is real, only half used with an expansion filed, and through every shortage here so far, the city's share of river water was untouched. The farms absorbed the whole first wave. Number 7 is what it looks like when buyers price a question the sellers will not answer. Number 6, Eloy and the Picacho corridor around it, the stretch of Pinal County where Interstate 10 runs between Phoenix and Tucson. Eloy is on this list because here the failure is under your feet. Arizona's first recorded earth fissure opened near Eloy in 1929. Today the state has mapped about 169 miles of confirmed fissures, and roughly 70 of those miles are in this one corridor. In 2017, a single new crack ran 2 miles, 10 feet wide, 30 feet deep. A fissure is not a metaphor. It is a crack that opens across a road, a pasture, a floodway, sometimes overnight after a storm, deep enough to swallow livestock, and it reroutes the floodwater that the desert gets all at once. The State Geological Survey keeps a public viewer where you can type in an address and see the mapped cracks around it. Most buyers never look. The mechanism is not mysterious. Pump the water out of the ground and the ground follows it down. Near Eloy, the land surface has dropped as much as 19 feet since the 1950s. The water table itself has fallen about 400 feet. Statewide, radar now measures more than 3,400 square miles of Arizona visibly sinking. 19 feet, that is a 2-story house gone downward in a human lifetime. The counterweight, and it is the most hopeful mechanism in this video, where imported river water replaced pumping in the 90s and 2000s. The sinking measurably slowed. The ground responds when the pumping stops, which is also the warning because the imported water that slowed it is the same river supply this week's federal plan is cutting. Number 5, Kingman in Mojave County, the high desert corner of the state, and Golden Valley, the community over the ridge from it. They are on this list because their basin is being farmed out from under them legally by owners who mostly are not there. The county's own 2024 forecast puts the Hualapai Valley Basin's deficit at 50,474 acre-feet a year, 63% worse than the estimate just 3 years earlier. Agriculture takes about 3/4 of the pumping. And an investigation of the ownership records found more than 99% of the basin's cropland under out-of-state control. The largest single block managed by a $500 billion asset manager in partnership with a firm owned in the United Arab Emirates. You will read that this basin is unregulated. That is one of the claims that died against the record. The state designated an irrigation non-expansion area here in December 2022. What the designation actually does is the story. It freezes new irrigated acres, grandfathers 12,600 existing ones, caps nobody's pumping, and sets the maximum penalty for not reporting your water use at $150. What moved in is industrial-scale nut and forage farming. The largest pistachio operation stands at 4,300 acres. Its manager told a reporter, "That is as big as we're ever going to get." New agricultural wells in the valley run to 3,500 gallons a minute. A domestic well is a garden hose beside that. Golden Valley, next door, sits in a different basin with no designation at all. In May of 2021, its improvement district's 1,500-foot well failed and about 500 homes went dry until the pump was fixed. The county runs an official standpipe there today. Hauling water to your own house at $6 per 1,000 gallons is an ordinary Tuesday errand. And in Bella Vista, beside the orchard blocks, the private water utility has asked regulators for a 98% rate increase. The hearing is set for January 2027. The counterweight. The city of Kingman itself is about 14% of the basin's pumping, grew 51% while cutting per person use. And in every scenario the federal model runs, the city's own sub-basin stays workable past the year 2155. The city has been the one begging for rules. Its managers said it plainly. The best practice of farming in the high desert is not farming. Number 4, Douglas on the Mexican border, and Elfrida, the farm community up the valley. They are on this list for the hardest reason on it. The people here saw the problem, took it to a ballot, won, and the arithmetic still is not close.
In November 2022, Douglas Basin voters did something no community in Arizona had ever done. They voted their own groundwater under state management, 3,170 in favor, 2,664 against.
The county board refused to certify the election until a court ordered it to. Look inside that vote and you see the whole rural west in one precinct map. Bisbee, the old mining town, voted yes nearly 5-1. The farm precincts up the valley, the people whose pumps were on the ballot voted no. The Wells decided anyway, because the Wells do not caucus. Here is what they were looking at. Since 1990, the basin has lost over 1.1 million acre-feet of stored water. The basin's first management plan puts it in one sentence: 3 acre-feet left the basin for every 1 acre-foot of supply. Agriculture is 87% of the demand.
The same plan carries the sentence that should be read at every kitchen table in the valley. If the water table reaches 356 feet, the depth of the average well, then about 59% of the wells at that depth go dry.
And what does victory buy? The plan's conservation program, starting next year, targets a reduction that reaches 6,400 acre-feet a year after a decade. The overdraft it is correcting is 45,000. The people won, and the plan they won addresses about 14% of the problem. The counterweight. Douglas, the city, is fine at the tap. 6 deep municipal wells, and its own 2024 water report calls the supply adequate for years to come. And the largest federal investment in its history is under construction right now. A $328 million commercial port of entry, opening 2029. Number 4 is the honest ceiling of local democracy. A town can vote itself a seat at the table. It cannot vote the water back into the ground. Number 3, Wenden and Salome, twin towns of a few hundred households in La Paz County, western Arizona, McMullen Valley. They're on this list because here a family's well competes directly with sovereign wealth. One monitored irrigation well northwest of Wenden tells the whole story in 2 measurements. December 1965, the water sat 243 feet down. October 2021, 615 feet down, a 372-foot fall on one continuously documented well. Across the valley's monitored wells, the average decline since the 1950s is 184 feet, and the ground a mile north of Wenden has sunk about 6 feet. The pumping at that scale has names. Fondamonte, the Saudi dairy giant's alfalfa operation, farms the next basin over at Vicksburg. In 2023, it pumped about 31,000 acre-feet, 81% of everything drawn from that basin by one company growing feed for dairy herds an ocean away. The state's attorney general is suing it as a public nuisance. A judge refused to pause the case this May. And near Wenden itself, the dominant industrial farm is owned in the United Arab Emirates. You have heard the Saudis were kicked out of Arizona, Chapter 13. What actually happened is narrower, and the wells here can feel the difference. Meanwhile, Wenden's little water district, 242 connections, watches the level and its 2 1,500-foot wells drop month over month, with repair costs up 30%. A local couple drilled their 3rd private well for $130,000. A Salome retiree paid $16,000 for hers. In January, the state created a new active management area over the Rangras Basin where Fondamonte pumps. It stops at the basin line. McMullen Valley, where these towns actually sit, remains unregulated today. One valley over from all of this sits Butler Valley, where the terminated state leases were. The state's own assessment says about 1.7 million acre-feet sit stored under it, and after the summer, the legal machinery to pipe rural groundwater to a city exists. Phoenix suburbs have already used it elsewhere. The people of Wenden can be forgiven for wondering whose bank account their region's remaining water has become. The counterweight. Federal money found Wenden a $555,000 USDA grant in 2024 for a replacement community. Well, a 3rd such grant in a decade. The nuisance suit is alive. And the new area next door caps the biggest pumper's expansion permanently. Number 2, Willcox in the Sulphur Springs Valley, southeastern Arizona, high desert wine country, and the most documented groundwater failure in the state. Willcox is on this list because the record here is not an estimate, it is a signed state order. In December 2024, for the first time in Arizona history, the director of the water department imposed management on a basin by his own order. The findings in that order, paragraph by paragraph: median water level decline 53.5 feet in 20 years. One well down 402 feet over its record. 29 wells that went dry in the last 10 years, and the order notes the department can only count the wells it is allowed to measure. 11.5 feet of ground subsidence since 1969, accelerating. 48.76 miles of mapped earth fissures. The basin's arithmetic from the department's own model, pumping has averaged about 136,000 acre-feet a year against recharge of roughly 50. The aquifer loses 76,000 acre-feet net every year. Now the part that makes Willcox number 2 instead of another side chart. 2 years before that order, the state put the same question to the basin's own voters. They said no, 63% no on the official canvass. The campaign, I guess, was financed, most of it by agricultural money, including a nut company that 2 years later received its own state notice limiting its irrigated acres. The state waited 2 years, watched the wells, and overrode the vote. The settlement's mechanics matter because they will be copied. Homeowners within a mile and 6/10 of the dairy's irrigation wells draw from one $5.5 million fund for drilling, deepening, hauling, and storage. Everyone beyond that ring shares another, and 2,000 acres of row crops come out of production permanently on a schedule that runs 12 years. At the center of the valley's transformation is a Minnesota dairy operation that arrived in 2015 and now controls about 51,000 acres with some 80 wells, most of them 1,000 feet deep or more. The typical home well here runs 400 to 600 feet. This January, the Attorney General announced the first settlement of its kind in the country, $11 million for neighbors' wells, and 2,000 acres permanently out of row crops. A counterweight. Willcox is also Arizona's federally recognized wine country, and the management the voters rejected is the thing most likely to keep those vineyards alive at mid-century. The order itself says unmanaged depletion threatens the industry's survival. Existing growers keep their grandfathered water. Homes, typical value under $200,000, down 3% on the year, in a market where every acreage sale now starts with one question, and it is about the well. Number one, Rio Verde Foothills, 2,000 homes on the northeastern edge of Scottsdale, many of them large, some of them worth over $1 million. Number one is the only place in this video where the thing everyone else is afraid of has already happened. On the 1st of January 2023, the city of Scottsdale shut its fill station to the water haulers serving this community. That was the supply for roughly 500 homes with no wells. We say roughly 500 because that is what the documents support. The 600 and 700 figures you may have read trace to no primary source. It did not come back for 281 days. Two details the retellings usually drop. Scottsdale gave written notice more than a year in advance. In 2021, when the first federal shortage was declared, the city's drought plan said exactly what it would do, and then it did it. And the community it cut off is one of the wealthiest zip codes in this story. Horse property, mountain views, 7-figure listings, hauling drinking water in trucks. The homes did not go entirely without water, and precision matters here. The trucks drove farther to other cities, and the market price of hauled water roughly tripled. One documented household went from $138 a fill to about $440. How does a community of 2,000 homes exist with no water supply of record in the state with America's strictest subdivision water law, Chapter 2, 5 lots or fewer? This entire community was assembled through the lot split trapdoor, 5 at a time, so the 100-year rule never touched it. When lawmakers tried to close that trapdoor months after the shutoff, the bill died on a tie vote in the state Senate. It is still open today statewide, and it was still being used here. In late 2024, the state issued a cease and desist to a developer running new wildcat splits in Rio Verde Foothills. What happened to prices is the cleanest natural experiment in this whole subject. Within months, documented price cuts in the tens of thousands, some 75 listings canceled or expired, sales choking because lenders will not appraise a house without water. Then the state brokered a standpipe. Water returned that October. A permanent facility opened this January and values came all the way back. The typical home in this zip code now lists higher than before the crisis. The permanent fix deserves one sentence of respect and one of irony. Respect. A regulated utility now runs a purpose-built $10 million station under state supervision, serving 1,400 enrolled homes at $75 a month plus $16.28 per thousand gallons. Connecting a new build cost $24,000, which is the first time water has ever had a sticker price here. Irony, the shutoff was justified by the Colorado River shortage, and the permanent replacement is groundwater. So number one ends as the thesis of the whole list. The water crisis here is not a wave that drowns a town. It is a supply that was never legally there, a rule with a 5-lot hole in it, a price that triples, a market that freezes, and a fix that moves the problem one aquifer over. Every town from 10 to 2 is somewhere earlier on the same road. Last chapter. This video was built by checking every number against the primary record, and this channel reports what died in that process because the corrections are the point. The 16-cent story. When the permanent Rio Verde station opened, outlets reported water at 16 cents a gallon. The approved tariff is $16.28 per thousand gallons. That is 1.6 cents. The number in the news was 10 times the number in the document. The Saudis were not kicked out of Arizona. The state terminated and declined to renew leases on about 3,500 acres of state land. The company still farms thousands of private acres, still holds state leases into the 2030s, and in 2023 accounted for 4 out of every 5 acre-feet pumped from its basin. And the foreign ownership law Arizona passed in 2025 covers China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Saudi Arabia is not on the list. The famous 4.86 million acre-foot shortfall is stale twice over. The state's own update cut it to 3.6 million, and a court struck down the rule built on it this April. The appeal is pending. Almost none of the coverage mentions either fact. Home prices are not in free fall, and this video will not tell you they are. The honest numbers, Arizona's index is down under 2% on the year. The worst market on this list is down 19% from its peak. And in Sierra Vista, a town with a genuine water adjudication running, prices are flat. Fear is not yet a pricing model. Lake Mead is not 1900ths of a foot from its record, as one widely shared figure had it. The arithmetic behind that number does not work against the government's own table. When we checked the daily report, the real gap was about 4 inches. It may be gone by the time you watch this. And Kingman's often quoted well die-off, 1 in 20 wells unpumpable, is a projection at 1,000 years, not 100. The model is frightening enough at its real horizon. It did not need the extra 0 removed. 2 smaller ones. For the record, Buckeye is routinely introduced as the fastest growing city in America. That title is from 2017. And Buckeye appears in neither of the last 2 federal top 15 lists. And the Willcox vote is usually reported with election night partial counts. The official canvass, which took a court order to produce, reads 2,443 to 1,461. Every one of those wrong numbers would have made this video more dramatic. All of them are wrong. What the record actually shows is worse in a quieter way. The ground sinking 1.5 stories at Eloy, a state order counting the dry wells it is permitted to see, and a 5-lot trapdoor that is still open in every county of Arizona tonight. Next time, the same maps turned over the Arizona towns where the water actually holds and what the state's own records say about them. Where to live, where not to. Every number sourced.